So again, welcome. This is the Cine-master class for lovely movie that we got to see yesterday, Chicken Run. And I will basically go inside and talk about the people who made this movie, what were their inspirations, and what kind of life they went through to become the people who made this movie, and then I will also explore the actual cast, crew, and the production pipeline of this picture during this presentation. So starting with, as always, we have to first acknowledge the makers of the movie, and in this case, the makers are Nick Park and Peter Lord. Usually when we talk about the people who make the movie, we usually talk about people who actually direct the movie. And as we have seen in earlier presentations, animated movies are usually not directed by one director. Other than the great Miyazaki, who used to single-handedly direct his movies, most of the animated movies are directed by at least two directors, in some cases even more. It is a work of collaboration on a very different level, and just like most of the animated movies, this movie was also directed by two directors, Nick Park and Peter Lord. I'll give you a little bit about them so that because these are very important figures. Nicholas Woolston Park, born 6th December 1958, is a British animator and creator of Wallace and Gromit. So Wallace and Gromit came out of his brain. Along with that, Creature Comforts, Chicken Run, and Shaun the Sheep. These are the characters that Nick Park created. So he's the creator of these characters. Park has been nominated for an Academy Award a total of 6 times and won 4. He is a winner of 4 Academy Awards with Creature Comforts in 1989, and we will see clips of these during the presentation, so you will know what I'm talking about. But initially, just an introduction. There's a Wallace and Gromit short called The Wrong Trousers, which also won an Oscar. A Close Shave won an Oscar in 1995. And finally, the culmination was with the Wallace and Gromit movie called The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which won an Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film in 2005. So these are the 4 films, not just films, shorts and film, for which Nick Park has received an Academy Award. Along with him, it is very important to mention Peter Lord. Just like Toshio Suzuki was important for realization of Miyazaki, Peter Lord was important for realization of Nick Park. So Peter Lord not only co-directed Chicken Run with Nick Park, he also produced all the movies that were produced by the Animation Studio, which we'll talk about in a minute, that created Chicken Run. Okay, so he is not only co-director, but he's also the producer of every single Aardman feature film. So Peter Lord, born 4th November 1954, is an English animator, director, producer, and co-founder of Aardman Animation Studios, best known for his clay animated films and shorts, particularly those featuring plasticine duo Wallace and Gromit. He also directed The Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists, which was nominated for Best Animated Feature at the 85th Academy Award. So Peter Lord is also not a small game player. He's a big time, very respected personality in the field of animation. So these are the 2 guys who came together to make this movie, and I will talk about how they came together and what happened. And next I want to talk about is the studio that created this film. The studio is known as Aardman. In a minute, I'll talk about why the name is Aardman. And what you're seeing here is the logo of the studio as of 2022. This was the logo of the studio before that. And I actually much prefer this one. Seems to be more, more clay, more, this, the other one seems to be very smooth. I don't know why, what was the reason for them moving into that and I grew up with this logo because I've been watching their shots since a child. And as we know, the Chicken Run was the culmination of all the shots in 2000 as the first feature film by Aardman. So this is the logo that was very well known for me and I identify with. And this is the actual studio. This is the building in which the studio is located. The studio is in an English town called Bristol, and it's in England. And they have been making animated movies since 1972. That is when they were established. I'm going to show you a short clip, and this will play in the presentation. Of this is a clip from a documentary that was made. It's like a trailer of the documentary, and this will basically just give you a brief about the studio. Just a very, very delightful introduction to the.
Your program's starting, Gromit. I know you've been looking forward to this one. Lost your chair, lad. Let me introduce the Relaxo-matic. Are we sitting comfortably? Let's go!
Aardman Animations.
No cheese, Gromit.
For 40 years, they have filled the world with pure plasticine joy, creating unforgettable moments.
Every single frame is just full of stuff.
In all honesty, I really do like the silliness of it.
We don't like potatoes, we like meat.
Goodness me, how are they going to do this?
Goodbury, it's you.
We have to rip that off for The Simpsons.
And characters we fell in love with.
Weren't you the voice of a plasticine chicken?
I don't want to be a pan!
I remember kind of going, and it was the most bizarre audition.
Let's go plundering!
They sounded rather marvellous.
I had this idea of an English guy who builds this rocket. He may have a cat.
This is a story of how very big things can happen, one tiny move at a time.
They changed the game entirely.
We did it!
The only thing you can say is that you feel proud of it.
Welcome to the Aardman world. Look at it, isn't it lovely?
That's the name of the documentary, and a soft introduction to the studio. Where did this all begin? These two guys that you see here are David Sproxton and Peter Lord. So these are the two guys who got together first. They were childhood buddies. They had a lot of interest in photography since the beginning. And David's father actually had lent him a still photograph camera that he used to play around with Peter and take a lot of photographs. But both of them were not very happy with just taking photographs. And they were very keen about telling a story through photographs. And they felt that still photographs, they just felt that it was not enough for them to tell stories. So they wanted to have moving photographs. And that's where the idea of stop motion came to them. That why don't we take photos and move the things that are in the photos at a certain rate, and if we then play those photos one after the other, we will actually be having some motion in the actual photograph. So this idea is separate from your classical animation, because in classical animation we are drawing drawings, and which are obviously eventually photographed, but the idea was that they wanted to photograph real stuff moving around. So they would have, they basically started with their kitchen table and started moving things around and taking photos. So this is a kind of a small setup that they had, and that's the camera. And they would just put stuff in there and then move it around and take photographs. And then when they would play it back, it would seem like animation. Yeah.
But they are not the inventors of stop motion.
No, absolutely not. But they were not exposed to the idea of stop motion from outside. This is something that they were doing in isolation. So, yeah, they were just experimenting. There were just two young kids with long hairs. We all had long hair phase in our lives, boys. And they were just experimenting with these ideas, and that's that it really stayed with them. I mean, all of us as youngsters have experimented with many things, but how many of them do we actually keep with us and maybe turn it into a career or something like that? And this is with the camera, and they basically just started doing stuff with things on a kitchen table. Okay, and so while they were doing this, they were also one of the parts of any artwork. Anybody who creates any kind of artwork is that you have to show it to people if you really want to make a career out of it. And they were taking all this stuff that they were creating to various television houses, and eventually they got an opportunity to create such animated shorts, stop motion animation shorts for a program called Vision on British television. And through this, they got their first chance for a broadcast program. And they went on to create some stuff with just cutouts. So they initially just started out by drawing cutouts and animating them, and then grew from there. So eventually, they at some point of time, let me just show you a few clips of. So this is basically just the kind of animation they were initially doing. And what you see here is, okay, why don't you just see it and then I'll talk about it. So what you're seeing here is basically a superhero kind of character, but he's very, very clumsy. And they were basically using comedy to tell their stories. And this is where, if you start looking at the kind of work they've done, you will see where it all started. Okay, so it started with this character, and this character was named Aardman. Okay, this clumsy superhero character was called Aardman, and the name came from two places. One was this very, very clumsy, very funny looking creature called an aardvark. So this is a real animal, and its name is aardvark. And since they were boys, they were into superheroes. So they combined the Ard of Aardvark and Man of Superman, and that's how they came up with the name Aardman. Okay, so this is in 1972. This is where it all started. So they created that name, Aardman, and they established it.
Yeah. The gag of the guy walking and falling in the hole. There was a Italian animated series.
I'm sure. Yeah.
La Linea.
Okay.
Very well known, very popular. Maybe you remember, like.
Yeah. So we'll have to see which year was that Italian.
Yeah, maybe same, probably a bit same.
Yeah, which one came first? The Italian. I mean, see, you have to understand one thing. Art is mostly inspired art. Even the first people who did something with art were inspired by what they saw in nature. So, yeah, but this basically speaks for the entire industry, that people get inspired by so many different things. And it's just so much fun to find out, this is the part of the research that I was talking about. It's so much fun to find out that what actually inspired these guys, like what actually inspired Miyazaki, what actually inspired, it's like everybody is inspired by Miyazaki, but then what is it that Miyazaki was inspired with? It's so much fun to find out the inspiration of people who we consider gods, literally. So this is where it came together. And I've seen many clips in which that gag of somebody trying to, some gag with a hole in the floor, or some like a Bugs Bunny rabbit hole kind of thing. There are many different kinds of comedy has been done around a hole in the floor. Okay, so that's about how the studio got its name. And so with this, the studio launched its initial small shots for the British television in 1972 through their studio, which they called Aardman. And in 1977, they came up with the first character which became a phenomenon. And this was the first character that they had done with claymation. So you will see that their roots are actually not in claymation. Their roots are in classical animation, hand-drawn superhero character. That's where they started. And then eventually they moved on to claymation. Specifically, they were very liberated when they found the material plasticine. So once they found plasticine, they really grew wings and were doing phenomenal work. Okay, so we will see, this is the character.
There you go, all back to normal.
So these are basically some clips in which I've shown the evolution of Morph. Initially, he was a single character, then he had friends, then he had various interactions, various comedic stuff. And this character with Morph became the most popular. They had a lot of interaction. In this scene, you can see that he came in with a very loud tie to show Morph, and Morph is basically just losing it because he's finding it so funny, and eventually thanks him for making him laugh like that. Now, this is a homage they paid to Charlie Chaplin with a black and white movie. And then in the same movie, Morph is shown as a baby, and they show how he's reacting to him being shown as a baby. Everybody's teasing him, and he literally goes in and starts arguing with the character in the movie. Why are you showing my baby? That's his father he's arguing with. This is another very funny clip. So they basically keep dialing this number, and they're put on hold. And they dance on the hold music.
Please hold. Your call is currently being held in a queue.
So this is him photobombing.
This is not from the 70s, no?
Sorry?
This is not from the 70s.
77 when it started.
You think they had smartphones at that time?
No, but these are clips from 77 onwards. Yeah.
So it's still going on, the same character?
It's still going on, yes, absolutely. The character, and this character, this pose that he just gave is actually, there's a life-size sculpture of Morph in Aardman Studio who is actually standing welcome to Aardman. That's his key post. So this, now what you're seeing is basically what the camera is seeing.
So
okay.
Those are basically like for broadcast on TV?
Yes, yeah. So these are shots. So they are not making films yet. You remember, the first film came out in 2000. And we are in the 77 onwards till when the first. And even now, after the release of the film, they kept making Morph because it was just such a popular character. And this work only Peter Lord and David Sproxton are doing. Nick Park is not in the picture yet. Okay, these two guys have co-founded Aardman, and they are doing all this work before they met Nick Park. And they basically literally had like plastic models, and this is basically their work area where they build all the models, and a 16mm camera.
Just a quick question, like plasticine, is it really the same material that we use at child to...
You're talking about Play-Doh?
Yeah, it's kind of...
No, it's a bit more stable than Play-Doh, but it is easier to use than clay. And they found it very good for expressions. So in one of the interviews for Chicken Run, they said that even though we do claymation and we do use clay, traditional clay, but for hands and faces we only use plasticine, because that is where our characters express the most. So it's easier to work with. So even though the body is moving just a little bit, but hands and face are where the most of the animation is happening. So there we use plasticine. Budgetary reasons, they cannot use plasticine for everything. It's a mix, yeah. But most of the things that you're going to see on camera and be able to focus on are in plasticine. So that's in one of the interviews they mentioned that. And it's not all plasticine and it's not all clay. Okay. So it's some parts are plasticine, some parts are clay. And hero parts, if I may call them that, are the ones which will be visible more, are plasticine. Okay. So this was literally their setup, a table, a camera with a 3 lighting setup, and that's how they made their animation for Morph. And so they were not just doing these short clips, they were also doing commercials, they were also doing music videos. So as their popularity grew with Morph and all these shots that they were doing, they were invited, they got more contracts, they got more jobs, and they're doing many such projects. And while all this was going on, in a small town called Preston, there is this very young student by the name Nick Park, who is at this moment studying in a school called National Film and Television School in Preston. So Bristol and Preston is another town, and he is very inspired by their work. And he is trying to create his own claymation by trying to replicate the the techniques of Nick Park and David Sproxton. Sorry, the last name is a bit tough for me. Sproxton. And what he does is, while he's doing his project there, his final graduation project, he actually sent an invitation to Nick and David to come, to Peter and David to come and visit him. And they were very happy to hear that somebody is inspired by our work and is doing his student film using our techniques. So they came to visit him. And they basically, so let me just tell you what idea he was working on. His idea was of an old man, a very simple old man, who is building a rocket in his basement, and to add character to the whole story, has a pet cat. So, in an interview Nick Park said that his initial idea for the pet was a cat. But then when he actually started animating it, he realized that it was easier to animate dogs because cats have too many characteristic movements that if he didn't do, it didn't look like it was a cat in the house. It looked like an animal in the house, but because of the animation was not convincing enough, and to make it convincing the amount of work that he had to do, he just gave it up, and he said it was easier for me to just animate a dog and make it believable. So that's how the cat character was replaced to become a dog character, and we got our world-renowned duo of Caped Crusaders who go by the name Wallace and Gromit. So this is Wallace and Gromit was actually his college project that he was doing as his graduation. And when Nick Park and so this is a test footage that he did with animation. So this is an animation test. Initially, he was doing these tests without sound. So Gromit was just a character, and he was doing his stuff, and there was no vocalization. But eventually, he reached a point where he wanted to do vocalization. So he approached this. I'm not sure if he's a British actor or if he's a voice actor, but his name is Peter Sallis, and he is well known. And he approached him. He sent an email to him saying that I'm doing this short project. Would you be kind enough to give voice for my character? And he was very happy to do it. And it's in an interview, Nick Park said that he did it for 50 quid. So I don't know what is the actual value of 50 quid, but it seems that since he did it for 50 quid, it was possible for Nick Park to hire him to do the work. And the way he approached Gromit was that he, based on the description that Nick Park had given, he approached, because he said that he's just a simple man. But to make that Gromit is just a simple, Wallace is just a simple man who is building a rocket. So it's like the whole idea of ordinary people doing extraordinary things was his basic idea. And but he didn't want, when Peter Sallis came into the scene, he said that, but he's extraordinary. I should give him a voice that people have not heard. So, he sent him a voice recording saying that, "Hi Nick, could this be the voice for Wallace?" And when Nick Park heard it, he's like, this is exactly what I wanted. So a very slow, very deliberate, but very gravelly, sound, which just hit the right tone. And immediately they started working together, and it was fantastic working with each other. And then we got so this is basically silent, and you will notice that his mouth is, the shape of his face doesn't change. Okay, his mouth is just a slit, and it becomes round, and it becomes a C curve upwards, C curve downwards. That's pretty much the range of his mouth movements. But when Peter Sallis added voice to it, Nick Park realized that I cannot have such a small range of motion because he's saying so expressively. So it cannot be so dull. I need to add some caricaturization so that the voice, when it comes out of the character, it sounds like, oh, this could be coming out of this human's or character's face. The voice matches the physicality of the character. And then eventually...
Gromit, that's it, cheese. We'll go somewhere where there's cheese.
So what you saw in this clip, this is one of the first clips that it did, and this basically became the trademark for all Aardman characters. When he says cheese, his actual mouth comes out of his head on both sides, And Aardman is now known for banana lips. These are known as banana lips. So most of their characters, when they are speaking expressively, get this banana lip design. So they attribute Nick Park for the facial expression design, and they were able to do amazing things because of this one small thing that Nick Park did, and created literally an icon. It's iconographic level of artistry that, I mean, just took over everything that Aardman did later. So these two guys came there, and they saw Nick Park doing all this stuff. And this is the project that he was working on, where Wallace and Gromit are building a rocket. And they came and they saw him working, and they saw that he was literally doing everything himself. You know, I mean, if any of you remember your student days, any projects you did, I mean, we were doing everything. You know, so we were like, as if you're a film student, you were doing the shooting, you were building the models, you were building the sets, you were doing the lighting. It's a one-man army, and they found him doing just everything on his own. And he has invited these guys to come and look at his work, and this is how they found him. And they realized that, oh boy,
he has gone farther than what they were doing, basically.
No, not exactly, because they were doing professional work, and he was building a student film. What took them aback was the fact that, what amazed them was the amount of work that he was putting in. Second, his creativity, his imagination. When he was talking to them, and Nick Park in an interview revealed that when he invited them, they came in, and the best thing that he saw and stays with him is that Peter Lord was wearing a badge of Morph, the character that Peter Lord had created. And he was just so amazed that, oh wow, you know, look at these guys, they are moving around with badges of the characters that they have created. And he found it so amazing. He's like, whoa! He literally like fanboying out, you know, watching them. And they were very well recognized at that time. And when they came in and they saw the kind of work that he was doing, the clips of the works that he was doing, and the setup that he had, and they actually saw him doing everything, they were really impressed. But at the same time, they realized that if he's very ambitious, but he's too ambitious to be doing it alone. And they said, at this rate, he will never finish this project. So they got talking, and they went and they proposed to the college that he was studying in, that how do you like the idea of us relocating Nick Park to Aardman and financing his whole project and giving him support of staff and artists and animators and whatnot. And basically they said, would you be okay if we produced his short film? And the college was all too happy to let them do that. So they basically came in and picked him up with his sets, with his models, with whatever setup he had. And in some cases, I'm not very sure, but there's a mention of them actually buying the camera from that he was using from the college, and just picking up the whole thing and relocating it to Bristol. And that's when Nick Park joined Aardman. So that's Nick Park, and these two guys are Peter Lord and David Sproxton. And they brought him to Aardman, and he started working on finishing his Wallace and Gromit shot in Aardman. Any guesses on how long it took him to make a short film in stop motion?
3 years.
Sorry?
3 years.
Okay. Nice guess. And with full staff, huh? So it's like what's happening right now is one of our friends, a couple, Aishwarya and Mukund, are working on a animated, a stop motion animation film, and my daughter gave the voiceover for that film like more than a year back. And we are still waiting to see the end product. It's been a year and a half and we're like, what is taking you this long? You know, it's not that long and it's very simplistic, you know, it's just some underwater stuff. And we know that they have finished shooting and everything, and you know that it took them a long time to shoot also. And then they're in the editing process, and then the sound mixing, blah, 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 all those things are happening. And finally last week she came in with a rough cut that, okay, Abhijit, this is a low resolution edit of without the titles and the credits and you know all that stuff of just the animation with Arohi's, my daughter's voice in it. So keeping that in mind, this first shot took them 6 years. 6 years to finish. I mean, literally the voice, there's an interview in which the Peter Sallis is saying, what is taking him so bloody long? But then eventually he did finish Wallace and Gromit. The first shot was known as A Grand Day Out. And it was a shot of them building this rocket and then going to the moon. And with his first animated shot, he was nominated for an Oscar. So this was the first of 6 nominations that Nick Park got. And because Nick Park was working in Aardman, Aardman also got the credibility, worldwide recognition as being the animation studio in which the shot was made. Okay. It took him about 6 years, but it not only launched Nick's career, but 2 of animation's greatest characters. So Wallace and Gromit, with this first shot, literally became world-renowned animation duo when this shot came out. And obviously, this was not the only one. They went on to make many, many shots of Wallace and Gromit. And other than Wallace and Gromit, so that was the first shot that Nick Park did for Aardman. The second shot that Nick Park did, anybody heard of this one? Creature Comforts? You never heard of it? Wow. I grew up watching Creature Comforts. And I mean, when I'll tell you about this, you'll be amazed at what these guys did. And so they basically created these small zoo-like sets where they were shown taking interviews of animals living in the zoo who were not really very happy about their situation. Okay, so I will show you a few clips, and then have you ever, yeah?
No.
Oh, you have never seen, but yeah, you understand what's going on here. Okay, so I'll show you a few clips of the shots.
Sound running when you're ready.
Well, sometimes you can't get out and about as much as you would like to. You're stuck in for some reason, like I'm stuck in today. And then, yes, you get bored and you get fed up with looking at the same 4 walls.
Well, most of the cages are a bit small and they're grotty and everything.
Yeah, well, it's reasonably comfortable, I suppose, this place, but... If you try to compare the situations and the environment that we live here with the environment that we live in Brazil, there is a big difference. Here, you live in a very small place with all the technological advances possible. I miss the fresh meat, you know, because in Brazil we are predominantly carnivores. We are not, you know, vegetarian, and we don't like potatoes, we like meat. And we like a fresh meat.
My favourite food is, I'm afraid to say, is steak.
Do you like lions as well then? Do you like steaks and chips with lions with it?
Not with lions, Andrew, no.
So, I mean, these are just snippets. If you hear the whole interview, you'll just, you know, ha ha, like that. falling on the floor, grabbing your belly, kind of, and people just went mad. I mean, this was comedy at the highest level. And there are interviews in which, I remember one interview of Terry Gilliam, where he's saying that we didn't know what they were doing, why it was so funny, who recorded these voices, who are the actors who are giving such believable performances, and people are just going mad. And then at one point of time, they revealed that these recordings are not actors. Nick Park had this idea. He got together with a journalist and went out and met people in different communities. So there is a Korean community there, there is a Brazilian community there, there is an African community there, and he went and met people who were living in very poor conditions and interviewed them about what was making them miserable and what was it about their country that they miss. So all those interviews that you hear, I mean, if you listen to them with that knowledge, it really changes so these are actual things that people said in interviews, and they used that voiceover and created this filter of animals, like the panther sitting on the tree is complaining that back there we were meat eaters, we were carnivores, we are not vegetarians. We are very unhappy, because it's like they're not getting the kind of food that they used to get back in their country. And then in this case, like, this is a family of 3 where the father is talking about, oh, I love eating this and this, and then the kid is poking him, oh, do you eat lion with that? And the father, no, I don't eat lion. So all those things, if you bring the context together with what is going on here, this just, it literally broke all records of viewing and awards and whatnot. And eventually, Nick Park won an Oscar for these shots. So Creature Comforts was the second time he won his Oscar, the first time with Wallace and Gromit shots. And so these are the kind of work that Nick Park brought to Aardman. And he and Peter Lord got together doing all this stuff. And then eventually he won an Oscar. I mean, I know whatever it is, it brought the kind of recognition, the kind of financing, the kind of budget, it just changes your presence in the world of media and entertainment once you win something like this. So this is Nick Park posing with his Creature Comfort characters and an Oscar. And then during their time together, eventually they did many of those shots and commercials and music videos, and so getting that kind of recognition also brought in a lot of projects. The singers wanted to make videos with them, bring in their kind of artwork into their videos, and eventually in the year 2000 they got together and made their first feature film, which we saw yesterday, Chicken Run.